everyone, good to see you guys again. We're going to talk about mass hysteria, clients and servers living together. My name is Schmidt. My email address has changed. Please update your Rolodex, Alex Sexton. It's now where Jed is, although it is Icelandic, so there is a connection there. Yeah, like you said, in 2004, I became a full-time Japanese translator. And then in 2005, and 6, and really 7 and 8, and 9 and 10 and 11, and then I quit in 2012 and I became a full-time JavaScript programmer. Hey, what's up? Crazy. Oh, hey, that was weird. Sorry. Are we still mirroring? Good. So yeah, so now I'm doing full-time JavaScript, and actually using both. I'm working at Uniqlo, which is like American Apparel. It's like the Japanese version of American Apparel. It's Japanese apparel. These shorts, if I may model them. From Uniqlo. Yes, thank you. And they dry really quickly. $24.99. They can be yours. Not these, but you can go to the website. Yeah, so it's cool. You know, I'm also in the Node firm. A bunch of cool dudes, or a lot of them here, which is really neat to see them. Really good to be back at JSConf. My first ever technical conference was JSConf in 2010 when I had the fortune of that volcano. And it's been really awesome to just see this conference grow. Now with 33% more Williams, they really upped that. That's been really nice. And also, it's really cool. It's here in Florida. My mom, went to high school and college here. I drink a lot of their orange juice. We send them a lot of old people from New York. Really, and it's cool because I don't know if you guys know, but if you have like a week, you get like a bunch of nerds together, like hundreds of nerds together, like a whole week, from all over the country. You can just talk about stuff, and you guys definitely. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but you can definitely keep the dream alive. I know because I did the same thing 20 years ago at Space Camp, right down the street. So my first talk was Fab. It was really crazy. It was this framework that was like really functional, and like all these not nested, but like all these parentheses to like, it was basically a Lispy type thing. It was very academic, and it didn't go very far. I bought a domain, and then I let it lapse, and it got, I discovered 2 months ago, picked up by a domain squatter. So you can tell I was clearly making good bucks off of this, off the framework, because it's a finance thing, and you actually read the text there. Almost all of them who pay taxes want to save some money from them, and hence they go for various tax-saving options which are available, and most of them are investment options. So if you think this language is difficult to understand, well, I would actually argue that it's not that much harder than Fab itself, which was there before it. So it was kind of an esoteric approach to programming. Then esoteric as well, I did the thing called 140 bytes. It was a code golfing contest. There are plenty of contributors here, I'm sure. We pretty much saturated the space of all the things you can do in 140 bytes. In JavaScript, it was really cool. I have this thing called Domo. It's basically like, let's put HTML and CSS in the syntax of JavaScript. So instead of writing style sheets, instead of writing HTML, you write it all in JavaScript. It's a small library. Presented that recently. I also wrote, I didn't write. I had written about me the Jed toolkit, which was actually, I woke up one morning and found out that my entire image had been co-opted by this toolkit for some reason. But it actually inspired me. I turned it around. I then found my favorite programmer and decided to make a library named after him, Angus Kroll. So I'm sure you can guess. The library is AnguScroll. It's a scrolling directive for AngularJS, so you should check that out when you have the chance. Oh, there he is. Thanks, Angus. Mass hysteria, client servers living together. Of course, everyone knows where this quote is adapted from. Ghostbusters. Human sacrifice, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria was the quote from Ghostbusters, which was filmed in 1984. Or at least probably released in 1984, even before that. Actually, it's probably 30 years old now. Wow, I feel old. Cats and dogs. 30 years later, if you Google cats and dogs living together, it turned out not so bad. They didn't have the internet, I guess, back in the 80s. Bill Murray is a great actor, but I guess he didn't see this coming. It actually was not so bad. So mission accomplished. Good job. Of course, that phrase, care of George W. President George W. Bush, care of Florida. Thank you for that, guys. Speaking of mistakes from the 90s, there was this book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. This is the same thing where it's like this kind of like cats and dogs can't get along. They can get along. We saw pictures, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and also, and I think our community of this like client-server model thing where it's like, are you a client guy or are you a server guy? It's like one or the other. You kind of put them against the other. So like, just like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's like, no, duh, people are from Earth. Hello, open a book. I don't know if Scientology, maybe they have a different thing, but I kind of feel the same way about our thing. Clients are from Mountain View and servers are from Oakland. But just like Earth is a common ground between Venus and Mars, we have the San Mateo Bridge. It's beautiful, really. No, seriously, like Angus talked about William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. I think this is actually the original cover that he had on his version. It's the Montagues and the Capulets and they're fighting, and then like the lovers from each meet, and it's this whole thing. Or likewise, West Side Story. It's an adaptation of this. The Jets and the Sharks, and to meet, and then for us, I guess it's more of a client-side story. But I'm just wondering, are we going to find our Romeo and Juliet? Are we going to find our Maria and Tony to kind of bring these two together? So the idea is, let's kind of kick this process off. Let's turn servers into clients, and let's turn clients into servers. Okay? So basically, I'm going to give two approaches of each. And so like you can kind of widen your horizons. If you're like a client guy, it's really easy to dabble, actually not necessarily in Node.js, but in other things to get more of a server background. Likewise, the other way. So first step, let's turn servers into clients. And I did this. It's called Browserver. Have you guys heard of Browserver? Anyone? All right, cool. Let me give you a little rundown. I presented it at Reject.js in Berlin, Germany last year. Reject.js, of course, run by Robin, sitting right in front of me, which is really cool. It was in October 4th, or as noted heartthrob Malta Uba calls it, April 10th. Actually what happened was I tweeted this, the douchiest tweet ever. Wondering if this exists. A Node.js server that exposes WebSocket-connected browsers over subdomains as disposable webhook-ready endpoints. Which is really, you can tell I hit all of the buzzword bingo of, I missed real-time and transpile, but I'll pick those up someday. So the idea is, it's a Node.js server in your browser, okay? Why would you want to do this? Browser. And it has a unibrow as a logo, which is an actual Sri Lankan letter, as it were. I don't know if they have unibrows over there, but so basically, it's HTTP over WebSockets, okay? So here's how it works. There's 5 easy steps, all right? Follow me on this one. Number 1, the browser connects to the server, right? So just like, browser connects to the server just using WebSocket, right? And then number 2, the server assigns and announces a host name. So the browser comes in on a WebSocket, and the server's like, you're going to be like some ID dot whatever my domain is, right? And then he can broadcast that to whoever's listening on the server. And then the server proxies HTTP in, so HTTP requests that are bound for that host get proxied to the browser. And likewise, any HTTP requests that are made over this WebSocket to general internet are proxied through the server. So there's no cross-domain anything. It's like you're just going through a server because it's a proxy anyway. And then the browser becomes a server. So basically, here's what it looks like. So there's 2 sides, right? There's a client side and a server side. So on the server side, first you have your WebSocket engine or whatever shim you want to use. You can use Sock.js, Engine.io, Socket.io, straight up WebSockets, whatever you want. That's optional. Then Browserver, which is like 1.3K of code. It's not a lot. This is like an API thing. It's not a technology. It's just like an API to wrap an existing technology. And your code looks like this. You create a WebSocket server. You create an HTTP server. And on request, you do some stuff just like you would Node, and then that HTTP server listens on the WebSocket server. Does that make sense? Is this all making sense so far? Okay, cool. Meanwhile, on the server, HTTP, Engine.io, for example, or you could do straight up WebSockets, Browserver, create a server for each. So the HTTP server, the WebSocket server, and then the Browserver. And then, the Browserver listens to the WebSocket server. It also listens to the HTTP server, and then on connection, it announces that a server has come, and you can bind to that whatever you want, and then you just listen on a port. So basically, it's a proxy that just maps HTTP to WebSockets. So it's really cool because it's only total 3K of code, and it's just like it's a good way to adopt that kind of paradigm. So WebSockets, it could have been server sent events. when I was doing this. I mean, it's because it's a wrapper, you really could use any of these things. WebRTC, or polling, or polling, which we know is long polling. Really, you could use anything. But why? So why would you use HTTP, right? The idea is like, well, why do we use JavaScript? Is it because we can use the same language everywhere? Maybe. It's not that you can maybe share the code, but at least you already know it. You're already in one domain. You're already probably familiar with HTTP. So why not reuse that for existing things instead of learning a new paradigm is one idea. Second idea is like, why Node.js? Like, why is Node.js so popular? Well, callbacks. Which are the best/worst/best, again, thing about Node.js. Whether you like them or not, callbacks are here. You can wrap them or you can't. What I don't understand that hasn't taken off, webhooks haven't taken off nearly as much as callbacks, even though webhooks to me are the HTTP version of callbacks. And so the idea is if you use something like browser, you can use webhooks. I can set up a webhook, give an arbitrary host to someone, and they can just do whatever they want to that URL and they get routed to the browser. So the idea is to push the logic out to the end nodes. So you can abstract your transports because now you're just using HTTP. You don't have to know anything else. You can decouple stuff because now that you have an actual transport, you can put things on different machines and use the tech you already know. That's the basic idea. And I got some feedback on a similar library that actually was relevant to this when I was releasing Domo.js, the thing I was telling you about with CSS. But this was actually a tweet that I really took to heart. Any sufficiently advanced JavaScript framework is indistinguishable from parity. So I'm towing a really fine line here. I'm not sure if it's right or if it's going to work. I have made mistakes in the past. I was in a boy band. That's actually not Joey Fatone, that's Jonathan David Dalton. Oop, I keep kicking this thing. Before he cleaned up and moved to Microsoft. Yeah, so we had this boy band and it was like pretty sweet. We charted with our first hit. But it started to unravel. It's like the classic VH1 behind the music arc, started going downhill. And then just it really all fell apart when we started getting a little too abstract in our message. Actually, I don't think we even charted on that one. So anyway, how much time do I have? That still says 30. Do I have infinite time? 15 minutes. Oh, sweet. All right, halfway point. Sweet. All right, so we turn servers into clients, right? And see what we can get from that. Let's turn clients into servers. And so. Yeah, yo dog, I know, I get that all the time. This is kind of the opposite of yo dog, if there is such an opposite. So client-side, server-side client, we're gonna do this. There are a bunch of tools you can use to do client stuff on the server. I'm gonna show you 3 of them that I use: Cheerio, JSDOM, and Phantom.js. Let's just go through these pretty quickly. You guys know who this guy is? That's Abe Vigoda. Abe Vigoda, God bless him, dead in '82. Actually, that's not true. I'm sure you know the story. People magazine said he was dead. He wasn't dead. He was performing in a stage play. Fine. They got it right, though, in 1987. Well, not really, because there was another dude who's like, he's dead, but he's not. So it's like this running joke, like, when the hell did he die kind of thing. But they had a website in 2001 to actually tell you whether he's dead or not. And it's abevigoda.com. Pretty sweet. There it is. The source is just what you think it is from that era. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. If you want to find out if Abe Vigoda is alive, you have to swim through this. So you can see Abe Vigoda is span class equals fixed alive. Oh, sorry, line return alive. So it's kind of an old school. So it's like obviously not intended for machine consumption. It's for humans, right? But like if we want to make an API and I want to know he's alive, I don't want HTML. I want yes or no. Or, oh dear, please no, not like this. I want yep, nope for Abe Vigoda. And so we scrape. And so, what do we use to scrape? Well, at the very, so I'm going to kind of go up in complexity now. So we can use Michael's request thing. We can install that. We can, have a really cool callback name. And when we find out from this website We can look at status codes, and we can be like, well, is the status code 200? And no, we don't know, because we can throw an error. But then what do we do? So we have all this HTML. How do we turn that into a Boolean? I mean, right? It's like, I'll just use a regular expression, right? I don't have to tell you where this goes. I'm sure you've seen this. It goes downhill really fast. I'm surprised Keynote actually rendered that. That's pretty amazing. Right, have you tried using an HTML parser, which is how that ends. It's actually pretty genius. So let's try an HTML parser. I'm going to use Cheerio. Have you guys heard of Cheerio? It's pretty neat. It's jQuery core for servers. So the idea is that there's no DOM. It's like a JavaScript implementation of the DOM. It's like very, very simple. And so it just lets you do the basic, simple stuff that you would expect to be able to do in jQuery in terms of manipulation and access, things like that. So get Cheerio, put that in, load some arbitrary, the API looks like this. You just load some arbitrary HTML, and then you can just run jQuery-like operations on it. It's really cool. So you install it, and then let's take this thing. It's load this body that we got from this website, call it almost jQuery, and then let's find class fixed. Let's find the first one, take the text, and let's trim it, right? And then if the status, that thing that we trimmed, is alive, then return true, otherwise false. That's cool. So how do we use this thing? Check on Abe. If he's okay, throw an error. If it's not if it is a Boolean, return, because this is just a test. And otherwise, throw. And this is how I throw as a code golfer, because I don't have time for your new error. This will return a reference error unless you have an OMFG variable somewhere up in the code, which maybe you do. I don't know. It'll throw in. Come on, it's got to throw at some point. This is on GitHub. Check it out. I have received one pull request, which I accepted 15 hours after the presentation. I gave this last stat. From Cowboy, thank you that, Ben Elman. So it works, and you can just npm install a Vigoda. You can also npm isn't all a Vigoda. Thank you to Alex Sexton for that one. He pushed that through. Isaac he has a soft heart, so you can do that. So Cheerio is easy, it's fast, it's in process. The biggest problem with doing something like this is JavaScript itself, because what if this web page is running JavaScript? We're not executing JavaScript, how would we know? So JavaScript is like our best friend and our kind of best enemy in this case. All your fancy single-page apps, what do you do? Well, next level up, JSDOM. OK, cool. So JSDOM's really cool. Dominic Denicola, who's here, is the maintainer of this. There's like tons of community involvement, as you can see. There's lots of modules that it uses, so it's very kind of reuse, kind of node style thing. And the API is pretty cool. You require it, you set up an environment, you inject a script, you get a callback, and then you can see how many Node.js releases there are or something, right? So it's a really easy API. It runs JavaScript, it's easy, it's in process. The problem is, actually there's stuff built on top of it. There's Node.io, which is a scraping engine. There's Toby, which is a testing framework. Zombie.js is another thing that people use. The problem is it requires C++. Because it actually has to create like a new context to like evaluate that JavaScript in, because it's coming from an arbitrary web page. You don't want that running in your your node process. It's also technically not a browser, so you might actually hit things where like stuff doesn't exist because it's a pure JavaScript implementation of a browser. So you can use Selenium, it's kind of heavy, or if you just need WebKit. If WebKit is all you need, or I'm sorry, as Alex Russell calls it, Blink Classic. If you just need that, you can use Phantom.js. So Phantom.js is really cool. Phantom.js is like a totally powerful tool. In fact, if you are a client, more of a client person, you're more comfortable with client, and you're looking to go server, I would almost recommend Phantom.js before I would recommend Node, because it's a server. It has the same API Node does. You like type Phantom.js and then type that the directory of a script. You just point to a script and it'll execute that code. But that code is a browser environment with a window and a document and all that stuff. And so I think it's actually a pretty good gateway drug to doing more server stuff. So I've been using it for a bit. It's actually really cool. So there's stuff built on top of it because it's a little bit unwieldy. There's a lot of people who want to use Node and want to use Phantom.js, and so or Phantom.js is maybe too abstract and they want to build stuff on top of it. Casper.js is a really popular thing. There's Spooky.js where you can actually draw all this ghost naming just really kind of gets I lose track of what's what. Spooky.js I believe drives Casper from Node. So Casper is like this really clean API for testing and stuff, automation on top of Phantom.js, and Casper can drive that from Node. So there's all this stuff. There's PhantomJS.Node. If you don't need the abstraction of Casper, you can just drive it yourself with PhantomJS Node. There's Schoolbus, which is a thing that's actually not really specific to PhantomJS. That's like just a way of driving around an iframe. It's a very Substacky API, if you understand what that is. So API, it's pretty cool. You know, there's system file system web server, web page. You can just require. It's like just CommonJS. It's pretty cool. System, you know, web server, web page. So yeah, you have access to like all of these APIs that you wouldn't have access to in a normal browser. Like for example, if you want to get the actual inner HTML of the web page, including the doc type, it's actually really hard to do in a browser because that's actually not available to you in a serialized format. So you can use PhantomJS to do that for you. And there's a few things missing. You know, function prototype bind isn't there, and there's a few kind of gotchas. But it's the closest thing that we have to like a browser that's not really a browser, then is very, very easily automatable. All these methods too. So I built this thing called Render. This is like my most recent PhantomJS project. Has anyone seen this? There was a similar library actually built that does a similar thing built by Airbnb. It's called Render. So actually I changed the name to Render Me. Yeah, so it's rndr.me. Me domain is I don't even know where, but. Yeah, so it's what's really cool. So here's what's for it. Do you guys know how hashbang SEO works? Do you guys know, like, if you have a single page app and you want SEO, do you know like how to do that? There's a few things you can do. You can inject. You can actually like compile your HTML and put it in a NoScript tag. You know, people do that. But actually, when Twitter came out with the whole hashbang thing, which is, by the way, the most famous piece of URL garbage since Alex Sexton's double meh. When you have a hashbang, Google will actually see a hashbang, and it'll actually go to that same URL without the fragment, because remember, servers can't see fragments, because the browser keeps that and just sends the rest to the server. So it replaces it with a query string underscore escape underscore fragment equals and the escaped version of what that hashbang was. Does that make sense? So that's really cool. So now you don't actually have to like do any of this like crazy HTML mangling. You can actually just tell Google like what your rendered HTML would be for any given page. So there's the Google API. So yeah, so it's kind of cool. And so what Render does is basically it lets you do SEO more easily. Because like the problem with single page apps is like, well, you want SEO, but you want speed. Right, because like, so you want SEO because like you want, so you do something server side because SEO is easier for the server because it's like well understood. But then you want speed, and we all know that for any app that you're going to spend a lot of time in and not just hit once in a while, client side apps are going to be faster. But you want the SEO, but you want the speed. And I think with stuff like this, you actually don't need to decide. You can actually have your SEO and your speed. You can have an SEO speedwagon. And that's what Render is. So basically the idea is this. All Render is, and I should, how much time? Oh wow, you fixed it, thank you. Let's actually go check it out. I didn't intend to fire up anything, but Render Me. So yeah, wow, thanks GitHub. Can you see that? Let's actually look at what some code looks like. So. Yeah, just create like a really tiny document, spin up a server to serve it, spin up a PhantomJS render me server, which is just a tiny little bit. It's maybe 3K of code, and all that does is literally eat URLs and poop HTML. That's all it does, right? So you're like, hey, render this page, give me the HTML. It's all it does, right? So it's not built into your framework. It's really cool because then you can just, when Google comes knocking, when you're like, Google's like knock 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 get / and you're like redirect to hashbang, and Google says, did you just tell me to go myself? You can actually give Google a 302 or a 301 to a service like this and be like, I don't have the rendered HTML, but you can get it there. So now what's really cool is you don't have to bake all of this stuff into like your existing app. You can just put one line that looks for that escape URL fragment URL and just redirects to a server like Render that'll render it for you. And so it's pretty easy to use. Quick start on Heroku. This is all the code you need to just get a render instance up and running. And actually what's really cool is like it's server-side JavaScript, but there's no node. We're actually using just a straight up Heroku build pack in this case for PhantomJS, which is really cool. And yeah, so the API is pretty easy. Just like give it a URL, an href, tell them like how long you're willing to wait, how many bytes you're willing to load, whether you should load images, and what the ready event is to actually execute rendering, and it will return the HTML for you. Yeah. So anyway, if you want to check that out, please do. Let me actually go back to my slides. I don't think I have much left here. And I think that is it. So what's cool about this, and I'm sorry about these like recursion memes. I feel like every one of my presentations has a recursion meme in it. What's cool about doing scripting like this is actually it's kind of a brain bender. If you are so like Google, like for example, the bot has a client that accesses your server. Your server then fires up a client, right? So that client then goes and gets a web page. But how do you get that web page back? Well, the client actually fires up its own server within Phantom.js, because don't forget there's a web server in Phantom.js, and then it uses that to respond to requests to get web pages out. And then I'm pretty sure it just all goes to hell. But actually, so like doing this kind of like putting a server in a browser and putting a browser in a server, sometimes it's useful, but it's actually like pretty rewarding programming in terms of like just getting like in one project like both of the server side and the client side in the same kind of code base, which is pretty neat. Anyway, so that's it. Check out RenderMe if you can, and thank you for having me.